Okay, I like to talk about the Constitution a lot. And a question somebody asked about the public trust. So I decided to ask the internet, what does the Constitution say about the public trust? And this is the answer it gave me. The U.S. Constitution doesn't explicitly mention public trust as a defined doctrine, but it does establish a framework where public officials are entrusted with power to act on behalf of the people and are accountable for their actions, forming in the basis of the public trust principle. Here is more detailed explanation. No explicit mention. When the term public trust isn't used in the Constitution itself, the concept of public officials acting as trustees for the people is deeply rooted in the document's structure and principles. Accountability and representation. The Constitution establishes a system of elected officials, president, Congress, etc., who are entrusted with power to govern on behalf of the people. This implies a responsibility to act in the public interest and be accountable for their actions. Oath of office. Article 6 of the Constitution requires all officials to take an oath or affirm to support the Constitution. This reinforces the idea that officials are bound to uphold the Constitution and act in accordance with its principles, including the public trust. Read the public trust doctrine, people. Know your power. State constitutions. Some state constitutions explicitly address the public trust doctrine, particularly in relation to natural resources. For example, the Maryland Constitution of 1776 stated that all persons invested with legislative or executive power are public trustees. Public trust doctrine and practice. The public trust doctrine is often invoked in legal contexts, particularly concerning natural resources like navigable waters, wildlife, the land, where states are considered to hold these resources in trust for the public. Judicial role. Courts play a role in interpreting and enforcing the public trust doctrine, ensuring the government actions do not unjustly harm public interest. Okay, judicial role. Courts play a role in interpreting and enforcing the public trust doctrine. Read it, people, the public trust doctrine. Know your power. The government, ensuring that the government actions do not unjustly harm public interest. Obligations, basic obligations of public service. You should read that as well. You know, we the people, I want big money out of politics. Well, read the basic obligations of public servers. There's a whole bunch of laws there being broken. All right, we'll go over that next time. But we needed to go over this. The Constitution and the Public Trust by Robert G. Nadelson. There's a lot to be said in the public trust doctrine in the Constitution. The California Constitution, Article 10, Section 4, contains provision providing protection similar to the common law public trust doctrine. Okay, people, so you really got to read that. What is Article 7 of the Constitution mainly about? Article 7 of the U.S. Constitution primarily outlines the process for ratifying the Constitution, stating that ratification by conventions of 9 states should be sufficient to establish a constitution between those states. Okay, so there's more explanations. Sorry, it's sometimes sticks. Okay, so let's close that. What are the principles of the public trust? The foundational principle of the public trust doctrine that it is an affirmative duty to the state to protect the people's common heritage and navigable waters for their common use. The traditional uses allowed under the public trust doctrine were described as water-related commerce, navigation, and fisheries. Okay, but you'll find in the terms of the public trust doctrine, it's also it's in the public trust doctrine. Politicians, the political atmosphere, they are there to serve the public interest, which means they are part of the public trust. The IRS is part of the public trust. They are there, because your tax dollars, those tax dollars were taking those was established to do what's in the public interest, in the needs of the many, not for the greed of the few. Remember my last video that I did, what the Constitution was who the Constitution was dedicated to, we the people. It was dedicated in the needs of the many, not the greed of the few. Okay, so there's a lot of questions you can ask yourself, and as I always say, there's a lot of questions here you may not even thought of that you'll find an answer to. Section 3 of the 14th Amendment depends. Section 3 of the 14th Amendment disqualifies those who have already held public office from holding any office if they participate in an insurrection or rebellion against the United States. What I'm teaching you is a lot of laws that aren't being used. Okay, I've seen peaceful protesters, get arrested just standing there and got run up on. I mean, it happened when I was a kid, and it's still happening now. Just want you to get into the Constitution as much as I did. And even still, I like to look up things. I ask myself questions, and when I can't come up with the answer, I ask the simple question, but an elusive question that there's a whole lot of answers to. And my question was, what does the Constitution say about the public trust? Okay? What does the 13th Amendment do? 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, ratified in 1865, abolished slavery and involuntary servitude except as a punishment for a crime throughout the United States. How to obtain a public trust, how to get a public trust clearance, undergo background investigation, wait for eligibility to process, wait for status update. Yeah. Well, we seen that, wasn't it? That's not happening, right? Okay, 25th Amendment proposed by Congress and ratified by the states in the aftermath of assassination. President John F. Kennedy provides a procedure for replacing the president or vice president in the event of death, removal, resignation, or incapacitation. My phone's messing up, but either way, I'm getting ready to jump on my computer, and this was a question that somebody kind of asked, and what I'm telling you, okay, or what the internet's telling you as far as the Constitution goes, states' constitutions, and there's laws in here, everything you can look up. This is just a legal insight. Okay, what does the Constitution say about the public trust? People look up the public trust doctrine. It's a key principle in democracy. Anywhere, everywhere, in the free world. Wherever, any country that says it's a democracy has the public trust doctrine. Anywhere in the world. That's why a lot of countries reject the rule of law, because the rule of law clearly states all laws apply equally to everyone. And without democracy, they don't, and they could sell off whatever they want. Mineral rights, land rights, But in a democracy, that's not allowed if you read the public trust doctrine. Okay? Thanks for listening. I just want you to know your power. Know who you are. All right, and don't forget, them not doing this is clearly a conspiracy against rights under the color of law. You know what a conspiracy is, right? Against rights, a deprivation of constitutional rights under the color of law, meaning they did it because you didn't know what they were doing was illegal, so you just accepted it because you lacked the legal knowledge, expertise, and education of that in the legal community. And they know they are required to get informed consent before doing what they do. And would you give informed consent? But first you would need reasonable knowledge to make an informed decision to give that informed consent. And I did a video on that about informed consent. Okay, this is Pops from Legal Reform. The only legal reform you need is to start using the law. I've been fighting this fight for a very long time. Throwing stuff in the courts, and I just get totally ignored. And one case citing my constitutional rights in a court of law, my right to effective assistance of counsel, my right to fairness to the opposing party, my right to, a fair judicial system, I was going to cite my lawyer for ineffective assistance of counsel, the state's attorney for prosecutorial misconduct, and the judge for judicial misconduct, which is because my lawyer violated every rule of the rules of professional conduct afforded to me by the rules of professional conduct, which is effective assistance of counsel established in the U.S. Sixth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution as well as the state, and that guarantees me that he will abide by the law in a court of law. But he broke every law possible, and the judge sat by and watched, and so did the state's attorney. In both the rules of professional conduct and the code of judicial conduct, it's mandatory to report misconduct, and failure to report misconduct is misconduct. The judge and the state's attorney refused to cite my attorney for ineffective assistance of counsel. He refused to cite the state's attorney for prosecutorial misconduct, the judge for judicial misconduct, and himself as well, because according to the rules, it's mandatory to report any misconduct, even if it's by yourself. So they're legally obligated to report themselves as well as the opposing party and the judge. Whether it be in criminal court, civil court, doesn't matter. It's mandatory, fairness to the opposing party. And that would have been fair. So I was not just going to throw all the rules and the codes at them for violating them, insist that everybody report each other. They took an oath to do that. Violating the oath is mandatory. Fines, removal from said public service, and incarceration. But arrogantly, mistakenly, just out of anger, after I was taken into custody, I was in custody, and I was supposed to go out to the court, and the lawyer told me, don't worry about it. We'll work this out in the appeal. I said, well, watch. I said, what? I said, I'm sick and tired of this. Because we argued in the courtroom. Just totally ignored. He wouldn't give me anything from discovery. I wanted to see the police reports, hospital reports, everything. And he wouldn't give me anything. And the state's attorney told me that's between me and him. But it was her job to see to it that I got discovery. Fairness to the opposing party and counsel. I am the opposing party. He is my assistance of counsel. He's there to assist me in my legal endeavors. By law, the state's attorney, any attorneys in that court, the judge, it's required for them to see to it that I obtain discovery. but it was withheld from me, which clearly shows a conspiracy against rights under the color of law. They work together to deprive me my constitutional right to effective assistance of counsel, a fair trial, due process, a quick and speedy trial. They didn't care about that. They didn't care about my demands, my constitutional rights. 14th Amendment, due process clause clearly states this is how it's supposed to work, but they don't like to work it like that, and they didn't accept the fact that I knew what they were doing was breaking the law. But back then, no cameras in the courtroom, the only witnesses were the lawyers and the judge and the sheriffs that beat the life out of me. They didn't take me back out to court. My lawyer ran and told the judge, because he said, "What are you going to say?" I said, "It's mandatory to report misconduct in both the rules of professional conduct and the code of judicial conduct." And he shot out of there like a bat out of hell. And they didn't take me to court, the sheriffs. They came out pretty angry. When they took me back down the elevator through the tombs, I thought I was going to die there. I made it to the phone. And before I could say anything, I was attacked. Tried to break every bone in my body, nearly crushed my skull, left my head swollen. All parts of me, including my groin, my abdomen. But I made a promise that, if I made it through it, I would finish what I started. And this is it. Well, not just this, but trying to make this happen. Trying to get everybody to live up to the oath, trying to get everybody to live up to the basic obligations of public service, try to make the public trust doctrine literally what the law says it's supposed to be. I have a tendency when it comes to the law to go by the letter of the law. Some people say, what about the spirit of the law? Well, spirit of the law requires a letter of the law be in use so that the truth be told. And that's what the spirit of the law is all about. Truth, justice. In the interest of justice, justice will be served. And that's why I'm teaching you what I can until I can't anymore. No matter where you look, there's always a conspiracy against rights under the color of law. And you understand just how many places it's happening once you look up the public trust doctrine. And then my other video, I told you, just Google where to file complaint for a conspiracy against rights under the color of law. You can just put conspiracy against rights under the color of law complaint form. And there's a lot of institutions that are supposed to help. When I was younger, much younger, people used to think I was crazy because I could recite this stuff. How do you know? You're just a kid. But, good thing I remember. And I'm getting too old and I need to pass the torch. So stop at legal reform. Get acquainted with what you need to know. In the courtroom, is where your constitutional rights go to die. When you go in there, you have to remember, in order to fight that good fight, you have to fight like your life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness counts on it, which it does. So stop by legal reform. There's a lot of things there that you don't know that you should know. And I'm just trying to get you there. All right? Nothing but peace and love for you. You know. Anytime anyone dare judge me by the content of my character, which you'll find in my videos, and then you understand the content of my heart, which is we the people. Just showing you what every public servant is supposed to be doing out there. Even told you in here, even the president, accountability and representation. This implies a responsibility to act in the public interest and accountable for their actions. Accountable for their actions. Why is nobody doing that? Oath of office. Violating the oath of office is mandatory. Fines, removal from public service, and incarceration. And if it leads to death, the death penalty can be applied. But that's in some of my other videos. You know, I had some people tried to have them blocked, but I wasn't promoting the death penalty. I am against it. I was just quoting the law. So they can't keep me off the internet for quoting the law. And that's all I'm doing here, people. Okay? All I did was, what does the Constitution say about the public trust? That was my question. And that'll be the title. All right. Good night. Sleep well.